Hi everyone, I'm Dale Smith, aka Journo Dale, and we're here to talk about Canadian politics. All right, we are here with Dr. Jared Wesley from the University of Alberta, and I figure it's time to have a chat about what's going on in his home province. There was just a bill passed before they rose called Bill 14, which did some stuff about attacking judiciary and the rule of law and that kind of stuff. My last extra column, I referred to Danielle Smith as the Victor Orban of Canada, and so I figured we should probably have a conversation about this. Jared, where do you want to start with this?
Yeah, I mean, the bill itself, what is concerning, especially before the amendments were made that, restored the power of legislative officers instead of allowing the justice minister to dictate, that what the chief electoral officer can and can't do.
Yeah.
To me, the broader concern is what is the rhetoric that we're seeing coming out of the premier's office, becoming increasingly bolder over time.
Yeah.
One on her radio show saying that she sees no legitimate place for judges as being, in her words, gatekeepers to democracy, which is an interesting interpretation of nearly a century's worth of common law in this in the UK and in Canada, and then also making these end of year interviews a little spicier for journalists who are asking her some pretty pointed questions about what we would assume to be off limits when it comes to the government's authority over things like immigration. And she's being very forthright about it. So you can say many things about this government. One is that can't be that they're being secretive about their plans, and so I'm glad we're talking about them.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting how it's almost like they stop pretending. It's just throwing everything out in the open right now in terms of just really the kind of base populist stuff that tends to signal that your democracy is in trouble.
Yeah, I mean they seem from the very beginning to have had one audience in mind for their public remarks, and that's the hardest core of their base, right?
Yeah.
And these folks are as you suggest, they're populists, and it's important, I think, for folks to know that term isn't a loose one. It's actually got a very specific definition. It's really important to know what it is, right? So when a lot of people hear populist, they think, oh, popular. No, actually, a lot of what the government of Alberta is doing is not popular with the general population. It goes against public opinion polling. Here you can include the getting rid of the Canada Pension Plan, starting a provincial police force, funding private schools with public money. All that kind of stuff is very unpopular, but the government keeps going forward. So it's not that populists are popular or have popular ideas. It's quite the opposite in many cases. What it means is that they have a view of what the people want and what the public interest is, and that that public interest is embodied in the leader, and that the leader herself is able to dictate what is in the public interest. It's a very different approach to governing compared to what we're used to in Alberta or Canada more generally, where we take a pluralist approach, which suggests that there is no one singular common good, but it's something that gets constructed by bringing different groups of people together, and just as importantly, having checks and balances in place to prevent one particular group of people from running roughshod over the rights of folks that they disagree with. And so this populist approach is in many ways quite democratic, if you like Athenian democracy from centuries ago. But since the Magna Carta, we've had a very different definition of how leaders should behave in liberal democracies like Alberta. It's just that the Smith government doesn't seem to play by that playbook.
Yeah, it's hard to I guess know where they're drawing all of the influences from, because I mean people will certainly point to MAGA, but a lot of people don't really know that MAGA drew a lot of stuff from Orban in Hungary and so on as well, and that these using populist techniques to attack minorities and could consolidate power for themselves in a majoritarian sense.
Yeah, I mean, I had the pleasure of serving a number of different premiers when I had a misspent youth in government, and I can tell you none of them was above consolidating power in their office. That's not absolutely not the issue. The issue is not even slagging the gatekeepers. It's when they start to remove the gates entirely, right?
Yeah.
And to start to strip away the power of legislatures to hold them to account through our system of responsible government, by circumventing or worse, disparaging the courts as being illegitimate. I mean, the Smith government did this right out of the gate with their first bill, the Sovereignty Act,
Right.
where they declared that the premier herself and cabinet would be able to determine which laws were constitutional or not. That's the job of the courts, right? And they'd be able to, worse yet, well, maybe just as worse, worse, they would be able to dictate which federal laws would apply in the province of Alberta, right? So
Yeah.
the foundation of this is the question of the rule of law. And that lies at the heart of small L liberal democracy. And that's where I think folks like myself have been raising alarm bells for the past 2 or 3 years. It's encouraging, I think, to see the legal community, judges in their judgments, lawyers through their own public remarks, are actually standing up and saying, hey, this is a bridge too far.
Yeah, there's a good piece in the CBA magazine last week as well from some top legal voices in the country who were raising some of these alarms. And yeah, the rebuke that the judge who was writing the decision on the separatist referendum question had in his judgment for the government as they were actively trying to undercut him while he was writing the judgment.
Yeah, and it's sad that we're at that point where sitting judges have got to stand up and defend democracy, but that's where we are, and let's not limit this discussion just to Danielle Smith. Premier David Eby over in BC has been also making disparaging remarks about the courts and weighing in on judgments that he disagrees with. Jason Kenney before Danielle Smith once referred to judges as Laurentian elites as a means of trying to delegitimize their ability to weigh in on public policy as they apply in Alberta. So this is part of a broader pattern and a longer term trend, but it's very worrisome.
I can also point Doug Ford in there too. He, a few months ago, saying we should be electing judges instead, and had the chief justices of all 3 levels of court in Ontario have to write a letter to basically rebuke him for that. So, I mean, it is a broader trend.
Well, and judicial independence is a crucial element of Canadian liberal democracy, right? And it's what distinguishes us from the politicization of the judiciary that we see in the United States. And let's not kid ourselves. It's not that judges are apolitical or that judges aren't appointed based on their ideological or even in some cases partisan proclivities. But the system is set up so that governments of the day can't weigh in or should not weigh in on matters that are before the courts and should respect the authority of the courts. There are provisions available to politicians, including the use of the notwithstanding clause if they see fit to respond to a particular judgment. Mm-hmm. But talking openly about it is really breaching a lot of customs and norms that have held Canadian democracy together for a very long time.
Well, that and using the notwithstanding clause before a judge can even weigh in on it, that's also part of what is going before the Supreme Court in March, and then again later in the year. So March is the Quebec case, and it'll be later in the year for the Saskatchewan one as well. So there's an
Alberta case the teachers have launched with this very similar question. So I think we're headed to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court will probably tie a lot of these judgments together. I'm not a constitutional lawyer as much as my mother wishes I was. But I could foresee them trying to make some kind of statement that puts this question to bed. On that note, though, I mean, my colleague Dave Snow at the University of Guelph has done the research on this, and preemptive use of the notwithstanding clause is not only far from uncommon, it's also the most common use of the clause historically. So I think that the folks that are making that case before the Supreme Court have got to fight a lot of precedent in that sense.
Yeah, oh, for sure. And a lot of it's going to come down to weighing in on just whether courts can weigh in or not once it's been invoked through declaratory judgments. So that's we've got a Quebec Court of Appeal said one thing, Saskatchewan Court of Appeal said the other thing. So that's what the Supreme Court's going to have to sort out when that comes to before them at the end of March. Yeah, so circling back to Alberta, I guess the other question I have is, I guess we're seeing a pattern right now where Danielle Smith is deliberately sowing a a separatist crisis in the province, and I just want to get your take on where you think that's headed. I have my own particular theory that this was something that Jason Kenney had started as a means of trying to look like a hero so that he can extract concessions from the federal government, and then Danielle Smith has kind of taken that into overdrive. But I'm just wondering, what your particular thought is on the fact that she's deliberately sowing this crisis.
Yeah, I don't know if I share that opinion of Jason Kenney's motivations. I think there was a real fear when after the federal election in fall of 2019 that the separatist movement would get out of control, and I think he saw his Fair Deal panel as a means of trying to act as a safety valve in that sense. And according to our polling, it actually did work. It took the edge off of the separatist movement for a time. Danielle Smith, I think, is a different situation. I think her Alberta Next panel and her legislative changes that make it easier and easier and easier for separatists to set us on a path towards a separatist referendum are quite different. And I think she's also facing a different set of forces within her own party, and we can talk about whether they've actively cultivated or sought out those elements from the conservative movement. The fact is that they're in control of the board, and they're holding her leadership hostage in the same way that anti-vaxxers held Jason Kenney's leadership hostage. So, I mean, to an extent, the party's done this to themselves. Their rules make them the most grassroots party in Canada, but this is the result: is that you open yourself up to be hijacked by the most radical elements of your base, and that's the reality we find ourselves in. Shannon Phillips on another podcast recently said that in the coming months the UCP and members of it are going to have to choose between two horses. For a long time they've been able to straddle this, these two horses, one in favor of a united Canada, the other one in favor of an independent Alberta, and they've been calling their middle position autonomist. What the Forever Canadian petition, now that it has been successful, is trying to do is to force them to pick. Right. Yeah. And that's not going to be an easy decision, particularly for rural members of that party, because they have been trying to make both sides happy. And I think we're heading towards a spot where they're going to have to choose. And it'll be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah, it'll be especially interesting if the UCP starts to split over this, and that could be a really interesting time if that does happen.
Well, that's what's lurking in the background, right? Because anywhere west of Manitoba, the New Democrats don't win elections on their own. They require a split on the right. And Jason Kenney and Danielle Smith, I'm sure, are very well aware of this, and they've been trying. Each of them tried very hard to keep the United UCP united, right?
Yeah.
But with a couple of different forces, the Republican Party of Alberta didn't have a good opening with the by-election loss as they did, but they still continue to campaign, and we have the new PC Party of Alberta, if they get to be renamed that.
Yeah,
the Alberta Party, I suppose. And both of them are actually striking some really interesting positions. I know that the Republican Party has been known as being the separatist option, the leading separatist option in the province. But if you look at their literature, they're actually not touting that as the first top issue. Their priority is about stopping the corruption within the UCP, which is also the same angle that Peter Guthrie and the Alberta Party are taking. And so if Janet Brown is right, and she's seldom wrong, Janet Brown, an expert in public opinion here in Alberta, has referred to entitlement and corruption as being, the kryptonite for Alberta Conservatives. This is not shaping up to be a great conversation, particularly as more and more details come out with the corrupt care scandal that the Premier's found herself in. So in a way, a lot of people are saying that she's deliberately cultivating separatism as a distraction from those kinds of scandals. If she is, I mean, that's a dangerous that's a dangerous game, because both of those issues are looming in 2026 for her.
Yeah, and I would imagine that. Well, I would add that the corruption angle is also kind of why it feeds into my theory of Danielle Smith is the Viktor Orban, because there's a lot of self-dealing that happens in that government as well. But yeah, I
Yeah, and
think
people throw around words like are these folks autocrats? Are they fascists? Are they kleptocrats? I mean, sure. I mean, they tick a lot of those boxes. At least the allegations are true, right?
yeah, that's
But to me, what ties them all together again is this notion of populism. This notion that they have in their minds what is in Danielle Smith's case. She has an idea of who is a pure Albertan, who's a real Albertan, and folks that don't fit into that stereotype or that definition for her are not entitled to the same rights. They're not entitled to the same prioritization by the government, and in some cases, they fall victim to being targeted by the government, and that should be worrisome to any Albertan.
absolutely. And on that cheery note, I think we'll leave it there. Everyone, don't forget to check out the book that Jared Wesley co-wrote, No I in Team, on party loyalty in Canada. Yeah, thanks again, and we'll chat again in the new year.
Thanks, Dale. Appreciate it.
All right, cheers. And that's everything for this week. Join us again next week for some more Canadian politics. I'm Dale Smith. That's at journo_Dale on Twitter and journodale_no_ on Bluesky. And don't forget to like the video, share, subscribe, and support us on Patreon. Thanks, everyone.